who am I? First off, as was beautifully alluded to, I'm an award-winning disability awareness consultant. I've been doing this work now for 12 years, completely freelance, and I don't call myself an activist because I feel like for me personally, consultant is a little bit gentler, a little bit less confrontational, if you will. And so I like using consultant because it means I get to sit down and consult with you and have a conversation and understand your side. Um, but I've been doing this work on disability and talking about my disability experience as a freelancer now since, well, yeah, almost 13 years, since 2012. So that's a pretty long time to be talking about my experience, but I'm so glad that I get to, because we don't often hear disabled people just sharing their journeys, and I'm very privileged that I get to do that. For the purposes of today, when we talk about disabled people, we tend to struggle with language. We tend to struggle with, oh no, how should I refer to them? Should I even bring up their disability? Should I call them a person with special needs? Should I call them handy capable? What language should I use? Oh no, and this is something I run up against a lot. So for the purposes of today, I want to make clear that I am disabled. I don't think disabled is a scary word, and I use it proudly to describe myself. As I've just kind of mentioned, I'm a freelance creative, so I get to do cool stuff like this, but I also get to do things like book reviews, my podcast. Um, I've done production consultants for TV shows and for movies. And so I really, really enjoy being freelance. But most importantly, for me as a severely disabled person, being freelance means that I get to build my job around my care schedule and the care I need to get to be able to work and to have my life. So having a 9 to 5 job is really not something that is sustainable for me. And so that's why freelance is the most accessible for me. As Chris mentioned, I use they, he pronouns. I also just go by Andrew, and I won't be offended if you mix them around. I use they, he pronouns to fiercely fight back against the idea that as a disabled man, I have to look and act a certain way. And so they is a nice kind of pushback to the establishment that says I have to adhere to masculinity or maleness as a disabled person a certain way. I'm also an author. I just finished my first book called Notes from a Queer Cripple, which will be out in early 2025. So stay tuned for that. I've been hushed. I can't talk too much about it, but it's finished and done and ready, and I'm very, very excited about it. As was mentioned, I'm an award-winning podcast host of the show Disability After Dark, which, although I can't see you, I know you're pulling out your phones right now and downloading my show wherever you listen to your podcast. It's the best one out there. So if you want to learn more about disability and just people's experiences and talking about things around disability we never talk about, listen to that. Most importantly for today, I am the coolest disabled person you will ever meet in your whole life. So, in case you thought there was someone else that was cooler than me that's disabled, guess what? You're wrong. It's me. I can't see you, but I hope that elicited some giggles from the crowd. All right, we'll move on. And this is a picture of me when I talk about how I talked earlier about how I did production stuff. This is a picture of me from One Queen, Five Queers, which premiered, I think, September 22, possibly. Yeah. So if you want to see me in on a TV show, it's on Crave right now. Okay, let's move ahead. Enough about my coolness. So this presentation, just going to do a bit of a disclaimer. This presentation will focuses on my experience using care and the reality of needing care while working from home for myself, and will be me sharing my own personal stories. It is not meant to give you all the answers, but it is meant to start a conversation and plant the seeds of anti-ableism. So I can't talk about every piece of my life here, but I'm gonna do my best to get you thinking about stuff differently. And that's all I aim to do today. In the presentation, I may use language like queer, cripple, gimp, disabled, abled, etc. to describe my experiences as a disabled person, so no one else's, just mine. I cannot and will not speak to the reality of all the other experiences of disability simply because I can't, but they are also valid and they are very real, but they are not mine, so I can't speak to them. I'm also aware that as I give a presentation like this, I have a ton of privilege as a white, cis, disabled man with speaking and intellectual privilege. I definitely make mistakes in this area. I mess up all the time, and I do my best to hold myself accountable. When you're thinking of speakers for this, when you have another event like this, consider seeking out a disabled person of color, um, you know, somebody with multiple marginalizations who's not white, who can speak to their experiences because they often get underrepresented and overlooked. So consider that when your organization looks to do another talk like this, because their stories deserve to be heard. Although I have a ton of privilege here, I'm also aware that I'm marginalized within queer and non-disabled communities. As a queer person with disabilities, I'm pretty much invisible. As a disabled person who uses a power chair, even though it's 300 pounds and you could see me coming a mile away, somehow, when I need help with something, I'm still invisible. So I'm aware that while I have privilege, I also live on the margins in some communities as well. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're going to understand the unique challenges of being disabled in the office and needing support. So, what kind of help do you need when you're disabled and you're going to a workplace, and how do we make that accessible? We're going to understand the accessibility and inaccessibility of working from home as a severely disabled person. So, as we all know, 2020 kind of threw our world for a loop and we all kind of went hybrid for a little bit there. Some of us had to work from home and still have to work from home. So what is the accessibility within that and the inaccessibility of working from home for me as a severely disabled person? Then we're going to look at how do we make the workplace truly inclusive for the disabled person and their caregiver, especially if it is their home. I work from home and I have caregivers coming in and out here 5 to 7 times a day. And it's my home, but I have to be cognizant of the fact that when they're here helping me, it's their workplace. So they have to be comfortable here. And how do we create that for both parties in that situation? So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. We're going to understand our personal biases and our own ableisms around all of that so we can confront those things within ourselves and in the workplace. And then I put questions at the end here, but I do encourage questions throughout that helps break it up and make it a little bit more fun for me too as a presenter. So please feel free, don't feel nervous to put in the chat or direct it to Carissa and she'll direct it to me. Okay. So my experiences of being disabled at the office. This is not a picture of me in the office. I tried to find one and I couldn't. I used to work for Rogers Telecom way back about 20 years ago, from 2005 to 2011. For 6 years, I worked there. I remember getting that job and being so happy because they were the first people that ever properly hired me. But that meant that for 6 years, I had to go into their offices every day to do my job. So this meant that if I started a shift at 5 p.m., I would have to leave my house at 3 p.m. to get specialized paratransit to get me in the office on time. I would have to curb my drinking about an hour before I left so that I wouldn't have to pee when I was there because I had no support. Um, I would have to, yeah, I would have to not eat because I was nervous about asking somebody for help. I had no care plan while I was at work. Especially at that point, I was just 21. So the whole idea of bringing a care person into the office felt, I felt I was too cool for school and I didn't want to have to worry about that. So I didn't have any care, which now at 40, working for myself, what I would give to have somebody with me in an office all the time, because that would mean that I'd have the support that I need to do my job properly. But I didn't do that. So it really was a detriment to my health because I would curb my eating, I would not go pee, I would curb my drinking, which really given my level of disability, was not safe or a wise thing to do. When I was at work, I would wear a condom catheter so I could use the bathroom, but it often broke and I had to go home early or call in sick. This happened probably once, twice a week. And the embarrassment I had of having to go up to a manager at my call center job and say, I have to leave because my catheter broke. They don't understand the intricacies of that, nor should they. And it was really embarrassing for me to have to be so open about that. But they were accommodating as they could be. Um, but I remember constantly feeling like I was the problem. And towards the end of my tenure there would be weeks and weeks that I couldn't get in because something would happen with my care. And I was treated like the bad guy. I remember at one point they brought me into work and um, they showed me the number of hours that I had been offline versus how many I'd been online. And they treated me quite painfully when they did all that. And I really didn't enjoy it. Um, I had no caregiving support at this job, as I've said. So for the whole time I was there, I wanted my employers to see me as independent, which is kind of laughable now because now, 20 years later, I don't see myself as independent. I'm completely dependent on someone else, and that's okay. That's totally fine. And I wish I had the courage to tell my job this truth now, because now at 40, I would say, no, I need somebody with me. These are the terms of my job. Make this happen, please. Um, I asked them several times within the tenure of me being there, could I please transfer departments? Could I work from home? Is there a way to make this accessible for me? And they all said no, which ironically in 2020, I found out that the center that I had worked at now moved completely remote. So they could do it. They could have always done it. And the fact they didn't is ableism. So it took a huge toll on my mental health because I had no help. I had to be in the office. I had nowhere to go pee. I had nowhere to have any privacy given my disability. I had no attendant care. The washrooms were not accessible to me at all. At one point, I had to ask one of my managers to help me in the washroom because I was really stuck. And it was just really, really hard to constantly navigate the inaccessibility of the workplace. So the pressure of all this made me quit my job. And looking back on it, I'm so glad I did because I was able to then transition into what I'm doing now. Of course, that didn't happen for years later, but looking back on it, I'm so glad that I left because corporate culture being inaccessible was killing me. Um, does anyone have any questions about this so far, about my experiences in the office? Well, we look for any chats. I'm gonna just take a quick drink and then I'll move on. Okay, so my experience is working from home. So from 2012 until now, as I've mentioned earlier, I have worked as a freelance disability awareness consultant so that my caregiving needs could be more met readily from home. The most accessible environment for me. So I still travel to do my job and if ever you're looking for a speaker and we can find the funds to get me out to BC, I love it out there. So I would be more than happy to come. But working from home, given my care needs, is the most accessible because I have care in the building for me whenever I need them. They're here for me. Um, and it's just the most accessible. And so even if I left my house right now to go for a walk, I'd have no care with me. I'd have no support. And so working from home just means I get to have my job. And while I'm so thankful for that, there are also unique challenges for me in trying to work from home. So let me share some of them with you. So one of the hardest things for me is scheduling meetings around caregiving, explaining to people and prospective contract employers that my care must come first, and this can be a very vulnerable thing to admit. So I'm so thankful that Carissa and the team over there, when I emailed them to say, "Hey, I'm in the hospital. I I won't be able to do it when we originally planned for this right away. They're like, no problem, let's shift things around. But sometimes I'll deal with employers who will say, oh, we needed it this time, and I'll have to talk to my caregiving team and try to move things. And that can be very hard because I live in a shared program where there are 19 other people who need support. I don't have a say in what they're able to help with and what time they can come all the time. So having to say, hey, my care needs come first, can we work around that, is very vulnerable. And also because when you work freelance, you want to show the prospective employer that you're up in game for anything. And so when you have a disability and you have to set those boundaries, sometimes it can be hard. Another challenge that I face is explaining to my caregivers who come in and out of here 7 times a day that I work from home and they can't just come in on a whim. So I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings or done something or doing something important or recording a podcast or working from home. And they'll come in and say, "Oh, hi, it's Laundry Day, we're here." And it's like, well, cool, but I'm trying to have my job. And it can be really hard to get the workers to respect that because again, it's their workplace, but it's my home. Um, so that can be a challenge for me. Um, I also find another challenge in working from home that having to cancel jobs due to my disability. So explaining to employers that I work with sometimes that I can't do the job due to my staff calling in sick, the workers not being available, the workers having too many other people to take care of at that time. Like sometimes I've had jobs that I've had to cancel because I've been stuck in bed or unavailable, and explaining those realities to employers, who've we've all assumed that if you're at home, you can totally just work, right? And that's not always the case. And so explaining these realities to employers again is really hard because you don't want to be seen as somebody who's not up for anything, especially when I'm freelance and I live on disability support. So getting any contracts that I can is vital to my, doing my job. And so it can be really hard to have to cancel when your body and your disability says, nope, not today. So for those who may not understand how the support system works in Canada. This is a picture of me and my mom at Buckingham Palace in London in 2019. She is one of my primary caregivers and the one that I take everywhere when I go all over the world doing famous cool things. But she is, I would consider her a caregiver of mine. So typically we're in Canada, caregiving for people with severe disabilities is available through two main streams. The first one is where I live, which is called supportive housing, and these caregivers are employed by a governing agency like, for instance, where I live, Marchedimes. And so they do all the firing and hiring and they do all of that stuff and they set up all the care for you. You don't do any of that, which is a good thing in some respects because I don't have to hire and fire or do any of that. I just get to come in and receive the care. The problem is I have no input in who provides my care. And that can go as far as being a little bit annoying to life-threatening. I've had situations with care here where they're very nice people and they want to help you, but they genuinely don't know what to do properly. And it's put my life at risk a number of times. So I I think supportive housing needs more voices of disabled folks. And the wait list for a care like this, I believe pretty sure in Ontario the wait list is still 10 to 15 years. In British Columbia, I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's pretty long. Like it doesn't happen overnight. You have to wait years and years for these places to open up. The other option for care is direct funding, and that's where the government will give you money to manage your own caregivers and to hire and fire. This offers a lot more flexibility, such as bringing your caregiver to the office or to work. But the trouble with that is that managing staff can be challenging. So my friend does direct funding and has his whole care team set up, but he has to deal with the hiring and firing, and that's a lot of mental stress. And I don't want to deal with that. I think that for me, in supportive housing, disabled people deserve more of a say. And again, direct funding can take years to navigate. And if you have to be your own bookkeeper, you have to pay the staff, you have to know how much money you earn, all the accounts. I don't have the brain power for that myself, and so that's not something that I want to have to manage. It's a lot of work, and it puts a lot of onus on the person who needs the care, and I don't have the mental fortitude for that myself. But it does allow for you to say, "Oh, I got to go to work today. Come with me. Work. Come with me. Attending care worker. Great." Encouraging employers to provide caregiving support in the office when people go in the office. I would love it if I could just go in an office and I could say, "Hi, I'm severely disabled. I want to work for you." And they would say, "Great, we have care set up. Let's go and do an interview. But don't worry, we have attending care workers there." That would greatly improve overall accessibility and inclusion in the workplace. Workplaces always think about accessibility, but they never stop to think about the human part of accessibility, which is caregiving. They'll put elevators in, they'll put buttons in, they'll put ramps in, sometimes begrudgingly, but they think it stops there, and it's so much more than that. Any questions so far? Okay. So, um, yeah, I think the two streams are important, but I do feel like both streams need more input from the people actually living the experiences. And I don't think either stream is doing that. And that's a real shame because disabled people deserve a say in their care. And right now, with both streams, we're not getting enough of one. That's part of why I did the work with my company Bumpin. I was the co-founder and chief disability officer. So everything related to disability, I had a say in. And when it comes to care, I feel like we deserve the same. We don't get that enough. So, practical strategies for accommodating disability at work, in the office, and at work at home. So, one of the things you can do to create strategies to make working in the office with a disability accessible and working in the office in your home office schedulings. So, deadlines and schedules must be flexible to accommodate changes in caregiving. So, if you decided that you wanted this deliverable report on the 6th, and I emailed you the morning of the 6th and said, "Whoa, my care is so crazy today. Do you think I can get it to you on the 7th or the 8th, or even the 10th, or a couple weeks later, depending on what my needs were?" You should say yes, because this is good for both the disabled employee and their caregiving staff because it allows for more flexibility. It immediately understands that um these things are important. It shows that you care about the employee's needs over the productivity of the company, and it shows that everything can be moved. As we learned from COVID, everything can be moved. And so I am a master of letting people cancel when they need to, when I do my work, um, canceling myself when I need to, even though that's hard for me, saying, "Can we move this over? Can we shift this over? What if we tried this? What if we tried this?" And allowing schedules to be really relaxed, because in our corporate 9 to 5 world, it's always go, 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 boom, boom, boom. And the joy of disability is, and this kind of allowance of relaxing schedules, it allows you to slow down and just do your best as you can do it. We all say that, but when it comes to corporate productivity, that's never the case. So allowing schedules that are shiftable is really important. When I worked at Rogers, I was there about 6 years. Probably once a year, I would review my schedule with them and say, "This is what I need. Can we move things around?" And they begrudgingly didn't like it, but they moved stuff around for me because I just said, "This is what I can offer you." They hated doing it, but they did it for me because I pushed them and reminding them that that this is what is accessible for me. Especially this strategy of moving the schedule around is especially good if you work from home, because maybe I'm in bed one day because I'm in a high pain day. Maybe I can't. The more flexibility you have, the more you will get out of your worker. Another practical strategy for this kind of accommodation is remembering that someone can have invisible and visible disabilities. So I have a visible disability. I have cerebral palsy, and I sit in a wheelchair. That you can see. What you can see is that I have irritable bowel syndrome. I have depression. I have anxiety. I have. I have. There's something else I have that I have a long list of things I can't remember, but I have another disability I can't think of right now. And those things may happen at the same time, and they may require different accommodations at the same time, and they may be hard for somebody to bring up to you in the workplace. So if I came up and I said, "Hey, Carissa, my CP spasms are acting up today. It's really hard for me, and my spasms are giving me anxiety and giving me a little bit of the depression, and that's really hard for me. Can we have a talk about that?" Be willing to like sit down with an employee in the office or via Zoom and say, "How do we support that? What can we do to make it come more comfortable for you in the office and when we let you work from home to minimize, not even to minimize productivity, but to minimize your discomfort around that so you're okay." And just listen to them about how both their invisible and visible disabilities either clash or work together, and find a accommodation that actually makes sense for them. If that means they need 20 extra minutes in the morning to just sit and be quiet before the day starts in the office, give them that. If they need a flex schedule because their cerebral palsy spasms are acting up, give them that. But just listen to them and support them, because one day you in the office will be like that, will maybe need support like that too. And so giving them that accommodation is not a kindness, it's what you're doing to ensure that your worker is okay as a person. And that's what we need to be supporting. Like we're doing today, which I'm so appreciative of. I love that we're recording this interaction and this meeting as we are today, because it means that any folks that were like, "Oh man, I really wanted to see Andrew Gurza today for this thing, but my chronic pain flared up or my disability flared up and I just can't make it there." But I know that there will be a recording of this. And it means that they'll be able to catch up on their own time. And it means that they'll be able to take notes as freely as they need to. And it means that the company understands the importance of people being offline to watch things like this, and they care about somebody's mental health over you have to be here from 12 to 1 to listen to this guy talk to you about accommodations, and if you're not there, you've somehow failed. Recording it is a really great accessibility feature that needs to be constantly brought up when we talk about workplace accessibility. I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again because it is so critically important, I believe. Having attendant care on site at the office to support employees when they can't bring their own person in. Now, this would mean that the company would have to look up what the rates are for a caregiver. Look up which companies might want to do that. Go into a company and say, "Hey, can we partner with you to have our employees on site so that when Andrew comes in to do his job, he doesn't have to worry about what's he gonna do to go to the bathroom? What's he gonna do if he needs to eat lunch? What's he gonna do if he can't reach that thing over there that he wanted to do in the office? What's he gonna do? He doesn't have to worry." Having it on site and paid for by the company, I would have died if Rogers had decided to bring in a support person for me. Then I would never have to worry. I wouldn't even have had all those issues with stopping my drinking, stopping my eating, all that stuff, because somebody would have been there. That would have been amazing. And they only cost $35 an hour, which for a big company like Rogers, That's nothing. They could have easily done that. And so for a smaller company, obviously we'd have to look at the cost. But bringing in attendant care on site, I don't think it's been done by a company before, and it's just something we really, really need. Of course, another practical strategy for accommodating disability in these instances is to listen to the disabled person and really listen when they tell you they need something and when they tell you they need this accommodation because of this. They're not doing it to get out of work. They're not doing it to game the system. They're telling you because they want to be there and they want to be seen as every other employee in the office, but they need your support. So instead of just deciding what accessibility you'll offer them and what accommodation you'll offer them, really and truly sit down with them and talk. When I explained to my employer at Rogers that I wanted to work from home, without blinking an eye, they said, "No, we need you in the office." And when I explained again that working from home would be easier for me because I'm losing so many hours trying to get into work every day, they didn't even think about saying, "Nope, you're here or you leave." And that was really discouraging for me. So if you take the time to listen to a disabled worker who wants to be there, who wants to um who wants to be productive, you have to listen to what they need and let them tell you all of it, even if it's uncomfy for you. Any questions so far? Okay. But feel free if you want to put them in the chat anyway. I'd love to chat with you. So practical strategies for accommodating disability at work in the office and at home, part two. Confront your own ableism as a worker. This is a big one for all of us sitting in the room today. I would love for you to. Oh, I see some stuff in the chat. I'm gonna pause this for a minute. Um. Oh, thank you for saying that it resonates for Saffron for saying no questions, but I have to say a lot of what you're saying resonates with me. Thank you. Thank you for saying you love the candor. Thank you. Appreciate that. Um. Thank you. So let me go back to this. So practical strategies for accommodating disability at work, at home, and in the office. Confront your own ableism. Consider how you, whether you meant to or not, have contributed to ableism. Now, I've said ableism, and I realize that I didn't put a definition here because I assume we all knew what it was. But in case we don't, let me just do an on the fly definition. Ableism is the discrimination, whether explicitly or implicitly, against disabled people in favor of non disabled people. So this happens in the workplace when we don't hire the disabled person or we choose not to make it accessible for them. This happens in our comedy when we say things like Donald Trump wears diapers. That's ableism. Um, when Donald Trump was president, they made fun of him every night for not being able to walk up the stairs. They made fun of Biden for not being able to speak coherently. Biden and Trump are not going to see that, but your disabled friends are. And we do it all of the time, whether we mean to or not. Ableism is everywhere in the work that we do. And just because I'm disabled doesn't mean I'm immune from it. I do it all the time myself. So we constantly have to sit down with ourselves every day and be like, you know what? Maybe I did contribute to ableism today. I'm going to notice that and work on it. That's all I want you to do. Don't chide yourself. Don't make yourself like, oh my God, I'm such a bad person. I did such an ableist thing. Yeah, you could try that, but that's not going to make you change your behavior. That's just going to make you feel bad about yourself for doing something ableist. Instead, just be like, yep, I definitely did something ableist today. I'm gonna try better tomorrow. That's all I would ask you to do. But as a worker in your office or in your workplace, think about how you've done that and then think about how you can make it better. Another strategy you could use is to create a safe space for disabled people in the office to unpack their experiences of ableism at work. It happens so much that we don't talk about it a lot because we want to be seen as productive employees. We don't talk about it, but it happens all the time. I remember once I was at Rogers and one of my managers, who's a sweet, sweet guy, he was a really sweet dude, and we were joking around. He said, "Oh, you're so lazy. You don't even use your legs." And I was young at the time, so I laughed it off. But thinking back on that, like, wow, what an ableist statement to make. And I wish I could have said, like, cool, that thing he said really hurt me, but I didn't have the words or language to understand that. So allow for a disabled person, like maybe have a focus group where you sit with people with invisible and visible disabilities and be like, tell us, how has ableism impacted you at work? What does it mean for you? How did it hurt you? And how can we do better? Make those spaces available. We don't really do that at work. We do it for a lot of other isms at work, but ableism tends to be the one that we don't really focus on, and that's a big problem because it does have such a big impact on our emotional health. The flip side of that also, I believe, is to create a safe space for the able-bodied worker to confront their own ableism. So sit them down in a group with a bunch of other able-bodied people and say, hey, what about disability scares you today? Where maybe did you contribute to ableism? Tell us. Like, get them to share that story because their disability is scary for a lot of people simply because they have no marker to understand it. And if we can create a place for somebody to be like, you know what, I think I was ableist today, and I don't know how to feel about that, and I don't know why I feel that way, but I want to talk about it. We need places where we can work through ableism as a group because it's everywhere. It affects all of us. And we need places where it's a communal discussion. It's not disabled people against able-bodied people. It's us together. We have to build those bridges. And so actively, even on the small scale, just creating an hour a month where you maybe talk about this as a group is really important. Another way to create accommodations and accessibility at home and in the office is to not to be afraid to ask questions in an effort to make something accessible. So be like, oh, you need a ramp? What kind of ramp do you need? Oh, you need help in the bathroom? What kind of help do you need? Oh, you need help eating? Could anybody help you, or is that specialized? Just ask these questions because then you know how to best help an employee. And people are so afraid to ask questions, in part, I think, because disabled people are angry a lot of the fact that they've been kind of sidelined and everything for like hundreds of years. So they're pretty pissed and they have a right to be. But I think sometimes that anger boils over. And then as a result, well-meaning folks who have questions don't have a place to ask them. And so I don't think questions about disability and questions about disability and caregiving are bad. I really don't think they are. And I would love it if today people had any questions about that for me because I know how scary it is to ask. So I'm opening myself up to any questions you have about that. Cool, my thing decided not to work anymore. Let me make sure that it is. 1 second here. Okay. How can you support disabled Canadians living in poverty? Listen to the people, listen to the people you work with when they talk about their poverty and the struggles they experience. So when somebody with disabilities is like, man, I live on social assistance and it's really hard for me. I'm here today working, but I still need that assistance. Um, Let them tell you. Just don't be like, oh, well, you're being so productive. You're not like those people. No, listen to them when they tell you how hard it is to live at the line of poverty. Share with your government officials how poverty impacts you and those you work with. So when you're working together, talk about poverty from both a disabled and non-disabled experience. And as COVID showed us, we should all advocate for universal basic income and discuss the risks of medical assistance in dying from your perspective. So we have medical assistance in dying all over Canada right now, which in some aspects is really great, in some aspects is really dangerous because instead of providing us with universal basic income or support, disabled people and workers are being pushed into medical assistance and dying instead of being given what they need. And that affects disabled workers too. That's why I included it here. And like I've been saying kind of throughout this whole thing, confront your own ableism every day, which is a hard thing to do, but do that without kind of hating on yourself. Just talk yourself through how to do it better. Any questions? And I would love to just open the last bit up to just conversation too. So feel free to um, ask me anything really.
I had kind of a question I think could get us kicked off.
Sure.
What's something about living with a disability that most people don't realize, in your opinion?
I think just the all the stuff we don't share with you, all the stuff that we hide from people because we're afraid that they're going to um judge us, all the stuff we don't tell them about, the times that somebody said something ableist and we laughed it off and didn't say anything, the times that I felt like a burden and I didn't say anything, the times that I canceled plans with friends because I didn't want them to see me as a burden, all the stuff that we don't share with you that we wish we could, that we may be judged for. That's probably the hardest part. And just constantly fighting for the basics in what is almost 2025. Like in Ontario, where I'm giving this presentation from right now, um, we're supposed to have our provincial disability code is supposed to be, our whole province is meant to be accessible in 4 months. And any Ontarian with disabilities knows that's laughable. So I just think how much the hardest thing living with a disability is how much we have to fight for just the basics that so many others take for granted.
And on that note, it's kind of two-pronged question. What's one thing you wish more people understood about accessibility and some tools they can kind of take away from this today?
Yeah, accessibility is so much more than just having a ramp, having an elevator, recording a meeting. It's how does the disabled person feel when they're in the room? Do they feel supported by you or do they feel judged by you? There's a big difference. And I think understanding that accessibility is a feeling we have, disabled kids know it. When I was 5 years old, I knew it. I remember going into my like kindergarten class and being like, "Oh, yep, that's not accessible for me. Where's all the stuff that I need?" And just you don't have the language for it, but you know it intrinsically in your body. And so I think the takeaway is if somebody with a disability is in a room and they don't feel like there's access, you can see it in their body language. You can see it in how they do stuff. I think that we have to do our best within the limitations of just capitalism to make things accessible. But part of accessibility is people just trying. So even if you can't get the bathroom to be 100% accessible at work, you can try. You can, look to make a space that's accessible. You can try to get workers in. You can have a conversation. You can start trying, and that's I think what a lot of us want more so than full scale accessibility. Sometimes, of course, full scale accessibility would be great, but I also want people to just try. And if I know they're trying, and even though accessibility is not 100%, at least by them trying, I feel welcome in the space. That kind of answer it.
Yeah, do you have any questions you could ask our audience, maybe to get them going?
Um, yeah. What is one thing you have a question about in your workplace around disability that maybe I can answer? Or I can broaden that out. Okay, two-pronged question myself too. What um what is one thing you've always wanted to ask a disabled person but have been too afraid to? Oh, everyone's so shy today. No, don't be. Oh yeah. What's one way to start to help someone who's nonverbal? Where to start? Great question. Uh, thank you, Karen, for asking it and being so brave to ask it. I think where to start is knowing that even though they're nonverbal, doesn't mean they can't communicate. A lot of times, my friends who are nonverbal will have a bliss board or will have some kind of communication device. Or I had a friend in childhood who had like uh flashcards, and you would go up to him and say hello, and you would blink his eyes at you, and you knew that that was hello, and then you would read through the flashcards, and it would tell you, "Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm nonverbal. Here's what I need you to communicate with me." And so I think a lot of folks who are nonverbal um, make a big effort so that non-disabled people can communicate with them. Um, but I think the first thing to recognize is that a non-verbal person can communicate. It may just look and feel and sound completely different than what you're used to. And that's totally fine. That's totally okay. And I think your fear around that, if there is a fear, is also okay. Um, I think you just have to know that they can communicate too, and they deserve the dignity of being thought of as communicators too. I hope that helped. Saffron, I see your hand is up. I wonder if we're doing that in the chat or I guess in the chat, yeah. My chat window disappeared. I don't know what happened there. Hang on one second. I had it open and now it's gone. Carissa, do you know how to get that back?
If you just go to the bottom of the window,
Yeah.
I don't see anything in there at the moment. If you do have a question for Andrew, just type it in the Q&A or the chat. Okay, her question. My question is, how do I support a nonverbal adult to find employment?
Great question. I'm speaking with a lot of privilege here because I'm not nonverbal, so I don't quite know but I think making it clear in an interview that you know this person's nonverbal, but you can still communicate with them. Making it clear on I don't know if I would put it on a resume because immediately they look at the resume and be worried. But when I do a resume now, I put that I'm disabled. They all know that I'm very disabled. There's no hiding that from anyone. Um, I would say that if you were going to go, looking for jobs, take them with you and say, "Hi, this is my client. They, you're going to communicate with them today, but I'm here to facilitate that communication as best I can." But pushing them to speak to him, don't talk to me, speak to them, don't talk to me, speak to them, making sure they know that I am not coming here to give because people are going to assume that you're going to do it for them. No, no, you're going to speak to this person, not me. Making sure that the employer knows this person is capable, this person is willing. They're just going to have to open their mind to a different variant of communication, which I think many employers are afraid to do. And I can understand where their fear comes from, because so many of us have been taught when you look for a job or have a job, verbally speaking is how we do so many things. But that doesn't mean that a person who's nonverbal shouldn't have an opportunity or shouldn't be considered non-viable in that space. Big topic. I know I only just barely skimmed the surface. I hope that I answered some questions there. Thank you. Anyone else? And I'm happy to just hang out and answer a few questions for about 5 minutes. So feel free to percolate with a few. As I said earlier, don't be shy. I've heard it all. And if I can help give you ideas or plant some seeds, I'd love to. Oh, I have a question for you guys while I'm thinking about it. Oh, good. With disability awareness coming up, was there a question there coming? What would you feel? What would you feel with disability awareness coming up? What would you feel would be a good way of showing? I feel like there's an end to that here. I'm just gonna wait a minute. Okay, great question. With disability awareness coming up, what would you feel would be a good way of showing disabilities that are not visible? Um, when I was in London, England a couple years ago, that picture that I showed you with my mom, we went around to a bunch of the shops and they have um lanyards that people can wear that says, "Hi, I have an invisible disability. Please, I need help in the shop." I think sometimes lanyards would be great. I think that uh showing having a lanyard or something that people can see so that the person doesn't have to be like, "Hi, I have invisible disabilities" all the time is really valuable. I think that not putting the onus on the disabled person. So if you're in a meeting with your employer, the employer could say, "Hey, what is everybody's access needs for today?" And then everybody, whether they're disabled or not, could say, "Oh, my name's Joan. I have a headache today, so I'm gonna need people to be extra quiet. Oh, my name's Bob. I have this today. I have, caregiving needs at 12, so I'm gonna need to be off for an extra half an hour. Oh, my name's Sally, I'm gonna need 20 minutes of quiet meditation." Make access universal so that somebody with an invisible disability can chime in there and not feel singled out. Now, I'm a star, so I love feeling singled out. I'm a, I like being like, my needs are really cool. Here's what I'm going to tell you about them. But some people don't like that. So giving everybody the chance to talk about access in a universal way might make people feel more comfortable. Hope that answered your question, Sufrin. Um, Donna or Natalia says, "What's something your colleagues did slash do that made me feel seen?" Well, I work a lot for myself, so what do I make me my what do I do for myself to feel seen? I just be very loud about my needs. But what other colleagues have done is, like I said, move schedules around, um, listen to me when I use certain language around my disability. When I call myself a cripple, they let me do that. When I talk about my experiences candidly, they let me do that. They really just allowing me to take up as much space as I need. Disabled people often feel like they're not allowed to take up space, and giving a disabled person the chance to be as disabled as they need to be is the best way to do that. Um, we're just about done, but I would love to. I think I put my contact stuff on the bottom of this slide. My email is there. If any of you have like burning questions that you were like, "I wanted to ask Andrew, but I was too scared. I wanted to ask Andrew, but I had to run off." Whatever it is, I'd love to chat with you. This was so fun, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this and for having me today.